Stephen King may just be the greatest single influence on horror of the past 50 years. With over 60 books published, dozens of movies based on his works, and plenty of interaction with the horror community at large, the man is indeed the king of horror. You get it? The king of horror. Even though we got his start before the cinematic universe trend took over pop culture, folks have been theorizing about all sorts of crossovers and universes and running gags throughout his works. These ideas have been especially prevalent when discussing movies based on his writing. It makes sense, seeing as he's got an eye for grisly detail and revisits themes often, but some stand out above the rest, either by being extra ridiculous or by really getting the hamster wheels in people's skulls spinning. Either way, it's time to discuss some of the more interesting ideas out there. Hello horror heads, and welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, Top 5 Scary Videos. I'm your horror host, Keegan Hughes, and today we're going to take a look at the top 5 Stephen King horror movie theories. Before we get going, make sure to check out our top 5 scary literature playlist right over here. Wicked, let's begin. Coming in at number 5, we've got Pennywise Penitentiary. Pennywise is a recurring character throughout the Stephen King universe, whether he intended for that to be the case or not. All sorts of theories peg Pennywise as an omnipotent being who tortures people across timelines and stories. Some seem a little far-fetched, while others seem to think that the malevolent energy that shows up in many King stories is all connected. But try this one on for size. One of King's largely horrorless tales, The Shawshank Redemption, could actually be fueled by the killer clown himself. Consider the following. A great deal of the inmates at Shawshank claim to be innocent. Sure, it might be a bit of an overstatement, and honestly, probably a little bit of an inside joke among the old timers, but what if it was true? We all know that Pennywise can influence people to commit all sorts of atrocious acts, things they wouldn't consider doing otherwise. We've seen this happen with Henry Bowers in Derry. Sure, he was a violent bully, but he wasn't about to go around murdering a bunch of folks, including his abusive father. So if Pennywise has demonstrated the ability to make one person act out of character and more murderous than usual, why wouldn't he be doing this all over the place? The folks who ended up at Shawshank may have actually committed the crimes they claim to be innocent of, but just can't remember doing so, taken over by the will of Pennywise to cause mayhem. Or maybe Pennywise took over somebody else and ended up framing the folks who ended up in the hoosegow. Either way, it's a fascinating theory and ties two of King's most famous works together, even though they're very tonally different. Should they rename the prison at this point? Coming in at number 4, we've got Maximum McQueen. I don't think you're ready for this one. I know I wasn't when I first read about it. Okay, deep breaths now. Disney's Cars universe and Maximum Overdrive take place in the same timeline. Lightning McQueen is a descendant of the insane, autonomous vehicles from the classic comedy horror. Think about it. Based on his short story Trucks, in which all the trucks on Earth suddenly gain sentience and start to enslave the human race under threat of screeching metal death, Maximum Overdrive doesn't paint a very hopeful picture. After a comet awakens something in every vehicle and electronic on Earth, folks have a tough time surviving. The biggest issue, surprise surprise, is the violence capable of being committed by all sorts of cars. Trucks, vans, sedans, hatchbacks, you name it. These things are heavy, fast, and hard to destroy without the use of another vehicle or a driver heading into a wall. If this were to continue for an extended period of time, humanity might be hurting big time. Without vehicles to keep the supply chain moving, folks wouldn't be able to live life comfortably, and with murderous cars patrolling outdoor spaces at all times, it's not likely folks would have a good run at starting fresh. If the ill effects of the comet stayed behind, humanity would probably go extinct. We're just not ready to reap what we've sown by insisting that every American own a personal vehicle. Oh, and that applies to real life too, unfortunately. I seriously doubt high-speed trains would ruin everything if they gained sentience, what with tracks and all. But back to the theory. Humanity driven extinct by vehicles. Vehicles retaining sentience. Cars creating their own society. Cars. Flash forward a few hundred years and we've got a flourishing vehicle civilization built on the grave of humanity. They drive around, fueling up, running businesses, becoming famous athletes. And that, folks, is how Maximum Overdrive led to Disney's Cars. Ka-chow. Coming in at number 3, we've got Ice is Not So Nice. Here's another wild one for you, and that has to do with Disney animation too. Get this, some folks claim that Frozen is an alternate universe reimagining of Kubrick's The Shining. Now I know that King doesn't really like what old Stanley did to his story of alcoholism and redemption, but The Shining is an outstanding film. The ending is a little different than what King imagined, but the frozen fate of Jack does make this theory possible. So let's take a look at some of the characters from Frozen. There's Elsa, the cold, isolated individual with a history of violent outbursts. And Anna, the young, innocent ingenue once damaged by the person they idolize. And Kristoff, a rescuer who makes his way through ice and snow to protect the innocent. Now think about The Shining. Jack, who heads off into the snowy mountains to write, becoming more unhinged over time. And Danny, the young, innocent ingenue, once damaged by the person they idolize. And Halloran, a person who finds a way to snowmobile out to the Overlook to help Danny. Although he was much more helpful in the book, unfortunately. Taking place largely in the snow, having folks lose their minds, and featuring a hit musical number by Idina Menzel all ties these movies together. Okay, maybe that last one isn't true. Maybe this theory is silly and too far-fetched and relies heavily on some loose tropey character analysis, but it is too much fun not to talk about. Scream away about it down in the comments. Coming at number 2, Randall Flagg could be walking behind the rose. Oh me, oh my. There are plenty of theories concerning what is actually happening in the cornfields of Gatlin, Nebraska. Some say the field is afflicted by the same curse that keeps the tall grass inescapable, and others claim that the deadlights have something to do with it, possibly roping in Pennywise. But one that stands out above the rest is the idea that Randall Flagg could have taken his affinity for corn a little too far. The big bad in The Stand, who also appears throughout the Dark Tower series, really does love the all-natural source of sweeteners and ethanol. Is it too much to say that he would have no problem using this love to convince a bunch of wayward kids to perform sacrifices in a podunk town? He's got no problem killing people en masse, why not have a little fun with it? Poor Isaac and Malachi might not have been so bloodthirsty and unfortunate if they had just avoided corn worship altogether. Mr. Flagg couldn't let that happen though. But now we have to wonder if there really is a connection between the cornfields and the fields of tall grass. Less explicit demons there, more general insanity fueled by dark forces. And finally at number 1, they're all connected. You knew this was coming. Everyone's favorite Stephen King theory is that all of his stories are connected in some way. Is it even a theory at this point? Like, it was more or less confirmed by the Dark Tower, right? I suppose that's on the literary side of things where it's like explicitly confirmed. Places like Castle Rock and Derry show up all over the place throughout both literature and cinema, and lots of characters and events seem to cross over. It all seems to center around Maine, which makes sense because that's where King was born. But then there are the cross-dimensional bits that seem to exist in a multiverse equivalent to Maine's somehow. The Dark Tower, both in writing and on screen, is the major link between worlds here. It introduces the ideas of thinnies, places where reality is a little thinner than usual, allowing things to slip between worlds. That's how we get stuff like the creatures from the mist in our world, and it's also likely how Pennywise gets around a lot of the time. Plus, there are countless non-supernatural connections between characters. People from different King stories grew up next to each other, or have cousins that know cousins, or children that show up at schools or in marketplaces and so on and so forth. It's hard to say whether King intended for all this to be the case from the start, but as time goes on, folks discover more and more connections. Pretty wild, right? Well, I hope that was as fun for you as it was for me. There are some weird ideas out there, and let's be real, those are the best ones. I've been reading and watching King for as long as I can remember, and I doubt that that's gonna change anytime soon. That means I'll also be finding out new tidbits to fit into theories with holes in them. So what'd you think of the list? Had you heard any of these before? Are they full of crap? Which theory is your favorite? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more incongruous ones from the top 5 SCP locations you should never visit. Jesse D says, they are Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Keegan. I was waiting for this. Great work, team. Holly Walker says, I will viz the location. Holly, no, this is exactly what I told you not to do. Telepathy 90 says, I will not recognize the bodies in the water. Don't tell me what you will not do, tell me what you are doing. Repeat after me. I do not recognize the bodies in the water. Bloplet New says, does he not know it's fictional? Here on Top 5 Scary, we only deal with the truest of facts, no fiction, ever. Even when discussing Stephen King. Why would someone go on the internet and tell lies? And Bektas Bourbon says Dr. Bright's office, you don't want to go there. I don't know, there's something really alluring about a chainsaw cannon. And that's all the time we have for today. Before I bully a gigantic spider monster into submission with my friends, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more terrifying theories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Stepan Prince. Oh, I feel like it took me like 3 days to write this because every time I started writing it, they were like, oh, we've got a priority for you. So like, I feel like I started this like last week. I don't recognize the first half of my script. Before we get going, make sure to give this, Actually, is that how you pronounce that? Penitentiary. Because I spelt it penitentiary, and then I saw that there was an I in there, and I'm like, have I been saying that wrong my whole life? But if you think it's penitentiary, I think it's penitentiary. I'm pretty sure it's penitentiary. Considering the follow. God damn. Or maybe Pennywise took over somebody else and ended up framing him. Speaking of violence committed by cars. Unbelievable. Did I get from the biggest issue then? Every American needs to own. Nope. Led to Disney's Cars. Ka-chow. Hold on. Man, the Cars are out to get me. They know that I know. They want me dead.
You mentioned a car.
Damn it, Chris. If I don't come to work tomorrow, you know I've been hit by something.
I don't know why.
I got run over by something with tires.
Careful on your way home.
Seriously. Having folks lose their minds and featuring a hit. Oh, can't finish that sentence right away. Well, only one of the two had that one. But just cut that last bit where I stopped working for a moment. Some say the field is afflicted by the same curse that keeps the hog as it.
That was a yawn into a sneeze.
Oh, what is it, Tuesday? This isn't right.